Oftentimes, when we don't have the lives that we want, and when we aren't becoming the person that we truly want to become, or we just feel down in general about something, we tend to shift the blame outwards. We blame other people, other things, and circumstances as to why we don't have the things we want or why we feel down. But what if I told you that you could potentially be the one blocking your own blessings? Because it's easier to shift the blame externally on other situations and other people, because then we don't have to look within ourselves and see why it is that we're trying to stop ourselves from achieving our goals and living the lives that we want, and how we are getting in our own way. And, a lot of times we are afraid of holding ourselves accountable and really seeing who we are and why we might be doing what we're doing. And let me be clear with you. I am not here to blame you entirely, because a lot of us, we self-sabotage without even meaning to. And I know this because I did it in the past as well. Like, I would self-sabotage without even meaning to, and I didn't even know that what I was doing was actually self-sabotage. And we do it to like almost protect ourselves. It's like a protective mechanism, because we don't want to get hurt, and we just want to protect ourselves from something that potentially could be scary or could hurt us. But in the process, we're really just getting in our own way and in the way of our success, of our potential, and from living the lives that we want to live and becoming the person that we want to become. But I am here to wake you up so that you don't mindlessly keep, hurting yourself and stopping yourself from becoming the person that you're truly meant to become and that you want to become, and from living the life that you truly want to live and becoming your happiest selves. I used to be the biggest block in my own path and in the path of my own blessings. And to be honest, I didn't even know that I was doing it, because it was very subconscious, like it wasn't happening in my mind. It was happening like in the back of my mind. And it was more of a protective mechanism, because I was being negative to myself and, saying negative things to myself, because in a way I was trying to protect myself. Because, and a lot of people do this, like they'll be negative to themselves. So they'll be like, oh, I look ugly, or I'm not smart enough, and I'm not successful, and I can't have this, and I can't have love, and I'm not worthy of this. Because, if you're being mean to yourself, then other people can't be mean to you. As in, like, if I'm being mean to myself right now, then even if someone else is being mean to me, because I've already been mean to myself, so like I'm almost in a way like neutralizing the negative experience in case somebody else tries to hurt me, because I'm already hurting myself. And a lot of people do this, like in many different ways. Like, for example, like a couple of days ago, two of my friends were talking about exams, and like both of them were like, oh my god, like I'm gonna fail this exam, like I did so bad, I'm gonna fail this exam. They didn't fail their exam, and they actually did pretty well. But they were, and when I asked them, I was like, why didn't you guys believe in yourself? Like, I knew you would do great. And both of them tell me, actually we did this, and they were like, they kept telling themselves that they were gonna fail, because in case, if by any chance they did fail, and they did think like they were gonna fail, but they kept telling themselves that, oh, I was gonna fail, and I'm definitely gonna fail, because they were like, in case if it did happen, they were almost like readying themselves for the experience, for the negative experience, so that, in case if it did happen, it didn't surprise them and it didn't shock them. And this example of both of my friends thinking that they're going to fail and telling themselves that, even though they didn't know that they actually failed, is a very good example of people thinking of the worst case scenario and preparing themselves for the worst case scenario in case it did happen, before it even happens. And usually the worst case scenario doesn't happen. Like for most of us, like we think about like the worst case scenario, the worst thing that could possibly happen in this situation, and it usually doesn't happen. But and a lot of us are like, oh no, but like it's good to think about that, because in case if it does happen, we're like ready for it, we're like mentally like prepared for it. But my question is that really the kind of person that we want to be? Is that really the kind of person that you want to be if you do this to yourself? Because it's like, yes, we're trying to protect ourselves from potential negative experiences, and from, we're trying to ready ourselves for the worst case scenario. But is that really the kind of person that we want to be? The kind of person who is literally just being their biggest enemy by trying to think of the very worst case scenario? Because it's like, we're being our own hater. We're being our own biggest hater by doing things like that, when we could be thinking about a realistic scenario, not the worst case scenario, because usually that doesn't happen. But if we think about a more realistic scenario that could happen, or even the best possible case scenario that could happen, why not think about that? Why not think about the best thing that could possibly happen? Why do we always have to think about the very worst that could happen? And it is also true that, let's say, for example, the worst case scenario does happen. Let's say both of my friends, for example, did fail their exams, and let's say that was the worst case scenario that did happen, and they were ready and prepared mentally by already thinking about it. But the thing is, that wouldn't have dulled their experience, their negative experience, or dulled their pain or lessened it. Because usually when our brain does this, or if you're in a constant habit of thinking that, if I think of the worst case scenario and I mentally prepare myself for it, then the pain that I feel, the shock that I feel will be lessened. But that's not true, because if it were to happen, my friends would have still felt really, really bad. Even if they tried to mentally prepare themselves for it by already thinking about the worst case scenario, they would have still felt really bad. They still wouldn't know what to do about it, So even though our brain is trying to protect us by already thinking about the worst case that could happen, the thing is that is only an illusion, because you're not going to be protected, because you're still going to feel hurt, you're still going to feel pain, you're still going to feel really bad if it were to ever happen. But the thing is, I really want you to ask yourself, is that the kind of person that I want to be? The kind of person who always thinks about the worst, who's very much of a pessimist? Because if you always think about the worst case scenario for everything, for anything, then really you're just a pessimist. And it's such a sad way to live your life if you're always thinking about the worst that could happen, and also your vibrations, like your energetic vibrations, your energy is in such a low place, in such a low state, if you're always thinking about the worst that could possibly happen, and everything being the end of the world. And even your manifestations and like those things won't happen either. Like if you're trying to level up yourself, you're trying to level up your life, then, and if you're trying to become a more positive person, then we need to let go of this habit of always thinking about the worst. Instead, we could think about everything going right. We can think about everything going right and us doing our best and us getting the results that we want. That's how you manifest things, and that's how you just live in a higher like energetic vibration and field, and like really get the life that you want to get and live the life that you want to live. And instead, every time a negative thought comes into your mind, or your inner voice is being critical or mean to you, we can replace it by saying positive affirmations. And this is something that I'm literally actively doing, and this is something that you need to like actively do. And for this, you need to also be like aware of your like inner thoughts and like what's happening, because a lot of times like these thoughts will just like come and go, but we really have to be listening to like what's going up here and like what our inner voice is saying to us. So let's say, for example, if you're looking in the mirror and your inner voice is like, oh, but like I look weird and I look this and I look that. You have to tackle it in the moment. You have to tell yourself, no, I think I look great and I put in so much effort and I look amazing and I love the way that I'm dressed right now. I love the way my makeup looks, whatever it is. You need to tackle it in the moment. Or if you get your test back and it's not the result you wanted, it's a bit less or whatever it is, and your inner voice is like, yeah, see, I knew I was dumb. I knew I couldn't do this. I knew I wasn't smart enough. You need to tackle it in the moment and say, no, I think I did great. Next time I can do even better. And I'm going to take my lessons from this time and put it into next time and do even better. So it's tackling your negative thoughts and your negative thought patterns with positive affirmations. And you have to do it like in the moment. It will get better as you do it and you build this habit. So obviously when you do it at the start, you might not feel like anything's really happening, but once you do it over time, your positive affirmations and your positive mindset is going to take over your critical inner voice and make it more of like a neutral and like positive sense. So it takes time, but it definitely works. And another thing to be aware of is when your inner voice is being mean to you, when your inner voice is being critical, or when it's trying to insult you or judge you or be harsh, then I want you to really, and this will take some practice and some time. And if you're hearing this for the first time, then it might not make sense, but I'll try my best to explain it. Try to pay attention to whose voice it is. Because the thing is, and this is something I learned as well, and it absolutely blew my mind, but your inner voice isn't you, It's like when we were young, when we were born, when we were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, we didn't have a harsh inner voice that was telling us we're ugly, we're not smart, we can't be successful, we're not worthy of love. We didn't have that inner voice when we were young, when we were like months old or like a few years old. But that voice develops as we, grow older. People are mean to us, people insult us, judge us, people are like that. And that happens with everybody, okay? And then we develop this inner voice that's like mean to us and that, just plays in the back of our mind and really just controls, how we view ourselves and how we perceive ourselves. But your inner voice is really just a collection of all the people that have been mean to you, and that you adopt other people's words and their insults and their voices as your inner voice. So your inner voice isn't yours to begin with. You know what I mean? It's just like, for example, if someone got bullied when they were in school or high school or whatever, and their bully was like, oh, the way you talk is so funny, or the way you're dressed is funny, or whatever. And then you adopt, we're naive, we're innocent, whatever. And then we adopt their words, their insults as our inner voice. And then we start believing in our head, oh, my voice sounds funny and I don't like the way I dress and, I look weird because of what someone else has said to us. So it's not even that we don't like ourselves, because when you were 2 years old, 3 years old, you weren't hating on yourself. You weren't looking in the mirror and going, oh, I'm ugly, or I'm not smart enough, But it's like over the years, we develop it because other people are mean to us. So that's what I mean when I say pay attention to whose inner voice this is. And this is like some deep inner work that you have to do and pay attention to. And this is also about self-awareness and like going back into your past and like kind of analyzing like where this may have like started or how this may have been. And it could also be like multiple people as well. Like multiple people could have told you you're ugly, or you're not smart, or you don't deserve love. But that doesn't mean, just because other people have told you, that doesn't mean that it's true. And so the very first step is just recognizing when your inner voice is being mean and whatever it's saying, you have to like remind yourself that it's not your inner voice. You never believed that. You weren't born believing that you can't be confident and you can't be loved. Somebody else told you that. And then you ask yourself, oh, where this, how this could have originated. When did this happen? How old was I? Whose voice is this that's actually playing in my head? Whose words is it that my mind is telling me, that my inner voice is telling me, because it's not yours. So pay attention to it. And then that way it will help you to realize that, actually you don't believe these things. You were made to believe these things, And then over time, like, it will just make a lot of sense, and, you won't be as harsh on yourself because you realize that it was actually other people's words and voices that are in your head that you adopt as your own. But, none of us were born on this earth, and none of us, were born hating on ourselves. It's just that other people's voice and harsh words have gotten to us. But, we can reverse it. It's just as we learn these insecurities, we can also unlearn these insecurities. So thank you so much for watching this video. Tell me what really stuck out to you in this video. And also follow me on my TikTok. I will drop it down in the description, and give it a follow. I make similar content on there as well, just shorter form. So go check it out as well. And thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you very, very soon. Mwah.